Hello, my name is Jane Hobson, managing editor at PAX International magazine. We're the leading business-to-business magazine in our industry. In partnership with PAX International, WTCE has put this panel together so we can talk all things rethinking food as retail. Together with our co-moderator and our panel of experts that are here today, we're going to look at how food and beverage can function as retail through digital paths to achieve a profitable and personalized passenger experience. I'm really grateful to be moderating this panel today, and I'm super thankful to all of our panelists who are here who have agreed to share their perspectives with us on the topic. And why don't we start our introductions with Kai Kosiki, who is our co-moderator today.
Yes, I'm very happy to be part of this group. Just for my background, I've been working in the airline business all of my life, and for the last 15, 16 years, specifically dedicated to catering and in-flight retail. For the last couple of years, I founded a company that specializes in improving exactly that experience on board. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'll go next. I'm Rodney Duty. I'm the president and CEO of Paxia. We are a SaaS solution provider to airlines, offering a solution that helps airlines do their catering management. So planning for all services, above the wing services on board. And our goal there is to make things more streamlined, more efficient, cost savings for them, and unlock the doors for further revenue opportunities for them.
Hi, my name is Almas. I'm head of operations for AVSoft. We do provide also the retail system called Sky Depot for airlines and catering providers so that they can organize and manage easier their all operations pertaining to retails on board. That's what we do, and also the entertainment system, which is also integral part of our services. It's all combined together and works like easing everything for crew, for managers, for catering staff, for all of them.
Yes, my name is Veronica. I'm the category manager for Norwegian Airlines. So we're an airline covering the whole of Europe and some adjacent countries. And my background is within loyalty, FMCG, and marketing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paul, Chief Revenue Officer at Data Clarity. We're part of the InFly group where we provide onboard retail and connectivity systems to over 50 airlines, helping them not only service their onboard retail operations, but also connect their passengers during their journey.
And I'm Kian, I'm the founder of Omnivo. Omnivo was the first to start building a fully integrated digital retailing platform from e-commerce, pre-order, loyalty commerce, buy on board, IFE, and post travel shopping. So our vision was always that we truly connect the entire customer journey end to end. And some of our customers are the first that have rolled out such end-to-end solutions like Virgin or Emirates. And so, yeah, we focus truly on the digital aspect of this entire journey, and we're 100% a technology company.
Awesome. Okay, excellent. Thank you all for joining and for introducing yourselves. So essentially, we see that the traditional line between onboard catering and retail is blurring. So let's kind of talk about, how airlines can transform food and beverage service from a cost center to, I would say, ancillary revenue stream while maintaining it as a core part of that customer experience, because we all know how it feels to have really great in-flight service. I've got a question that I would like to start with. And like I said, the floor is always open. So everyone is invited rather to join in at any time. So a general question that I think is maybe a great place for us to start. How do airlines maybe need to change their mindset? Veronica, you could perhaps speak to this, about food service to view it as a retail opportunity or a retail product with a profit margin. Veronica, do you want to start there?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good question. And, I'm part of the in-flight retail team, and we have put a big emphasis on actually including the word retail in our team. And we have also expanded the team during the last couple of years because we see it as it's such a kind of important part of the in-flight experience. It's not just about, what kind of fits in the trolleys and what to have something on board is a business opportunity for us, and we need to kind of see it as that as well. We like to say that we have like one of the smallest shops in the world. It's a it's a super small boutique, but it's still a retail concept, and we need to, to have that in mind when we do the assortment mix and crew training and to build a sales culture. So it's much more than a catering, and we are definitely kind of going away from that term.
Yeah, absolutely. Kai, what about you as our co-moderator and also an expert for consulting?
Well, I think if you look at the numbers in the entire ancillary model of an airline, typically the food and beverage has a very small percentage. So I think in order for the airlines to get rich, it's probably not the right lever. So I think it's the key for retail for me is to create personalization, to create a customer specific option and not the one size fits all, to move away from that in order to open up the opportunity for customers to get the food or the drinks or whatever they want. And then for me, the most important thing is to increase the customer experience and the satisfaction at this level. I tend to say, and you may hate me for that, but I tend to say that the real profit and the revenue of the retail, especially when it comes to food and beverage, maybe a secondary. So,
Yeah.
I think Veronica raised a good point as well in terms of the size of the shop in the air, right? So space is limited on board, and using the data points that you have, coupled with the aspirations in terms of personalization, both with the data you have from the retail and the people that are traveling, it's about optimizing what you're putting on there, making the most of the space in terms of the passenger satisfaction and the revenue that's coming from it, and trying to view this as a profitable exercise, not a necessary thing to do.
Does anyone else have a point or anything that they want to jump
Yeah,
in?
interestingly, I just want to add. In past, we've seen a couple of cases when airlines and LCC models started flying, and they decided not to fly with retail on board. And after some time, they actually came to us asking if we can do something about it because passengers on their flights started demanding for meals to be sold and giving examples of other airlines in the region saying, can we buy food, something on this flight? Because we had a flight with this airline and they were selling it and you don't sell anything. Can we get something? And this demand from passengers actually indicates and shows that passengers are now well traveled and they've seen different models from full service airlines and low cost airlines, and that selling on board of goods is now like a must for airlines. And of course, some airlines can think that this is fuel burn equipment and managing all of this can be hard and stressful. But when they see how passengers react and that they're actually giving higher ratings to the airlines for good meals on board and good prices, then yeah, they see benefits. And therefore, I think that airlines are shifting their mindsets from cost perspective of the meals to the customer experience from the meals.
Yeah,
I think one thing that's worth adding also is that there are different ways to generate profit out of a retail program. So one of the key things that is often overlooked is when you really couple pre-order with buy on board in a very efficient, data-driven, forecasted way, you can save a couple of million on your waste cost as well. So that is a very big driver. We've had some of our customers go from 30% of the food thrown away at the end of the journey to 10% of the food thrown away. And that can save you, yeah, as I said, several million in your total cost of the program. And that's sometimes easier than squeezing another 3 million out of your profitability on the program.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I completely agree with that. The uptake of pre-order is another avenue to recoup revenue from what was purely just a cost of complimentary meals, and I see that prevalent also in the very large caters, the legacy caters that or airlines that were primarily the full service of the aircraft was complimentary. So being able to recoup some of that through onboard sales, but that pre-order uptake is critical.
Okay. Veronica, that was a question. I've got so many places I want to come back to. I want to come back to personalization. But since we're a little bit on the topic of the waste part, and I think the bit we can talk about before that is really the AI and predictive analysis. But I'm wondering from, Veronica, for Norwegian, how is data from pre-orders onboard sit? Like how are these things actually reducing waste? Are you seeing that happen?
Well, for us, that's kind of a there's two workflows in that sense. But we have been talking about, can we have a zero food waste, kind of ambition in the future, and the solution probably lies within the pre-order services. But for us, there's this balance because we have a lot of shorter flights, and the customers don't really make the decision to order any kind of pre-order meals beforehand, so they kind of make the decisions very, very close to the actual flight. So in that sense, we really see the need to have some kind of fresh food concept on board, which of course then generates a lot of food waste. But at the same time, we try to kind of urge the customers to make this kind of pre-order meals choices, because it does really help us reduce food waste. But it's for us, it's probably also a lot of about customer mindset. People are, taking more, impulse buy. They're perhaps not making that decision unless they get closer to the actual airport or even at the airport. So perhaps beforehand, people, planning their vacation a bit further in time, but now it's like very much on the spot, and people expect to find solutions right there and then, not just for food. It could, be kind of all digital solutions or anything they want at that time, they want it straight away. So for us, we need to kind of have that combination, but food waste it's really important for us to kind of get that down. We actually introduced some time ago, we actually introduced this last leg promotion. So when you come to the last leg of the day, we then offer the fresh food on board for a 50% discount. And this has really, really helped us. So the crew then announces it, and we sell, often kind of what's remaining on board. So, we're trying to find a solution within what we have. And that has been a very good step for us.
I think one thing that's relevant to add here is that pre-ordering your food on an airline is not a learned behavior yet, because airlines have been so slow in adopting it in a meaningful way. So we are all very used to pre-ordering whatever we want on Uber Eats, but with an airline, you always expect they won't figure out how to do it. So and then of course a lot of airlines, all they have done is basically made it possible to pre-order the same stuff that they sell from the cart, which is then another reason not to pre-order at all, because it's going to be in the cart anyway, right? So the programs that truly convert are the ones where you're expanding the horizon of what can be ordered. You have much more variety of food, because as we know, taste has changed a lot, and allergies have changed a lot, and preferences and so on. So, already 10 years ago, when we were working with Singapore Airlines and they launched their Book the Chef program, where you could order from 200 meals, that had a very, very, and still does, a very, very significant uptake from the business class, because people do care what they eat on a 10-hour flight. But if you can just pre-order between chicken and vegetarian, then, you're just not going to bother. I think that there's a lot about how you shape the offering to increase the uptick and conversion rate there.
Yeah, I think I could just actually add on that one, because last year we introduced, we have this pre-order meal concept for our flights above a certain flight time, and then we introduce an upgraded meal in addition to the standard meals, and that one has performed quite much better than what we were expecting. We were not quite sure how our passengers would perceive this. We are kind of a low cost carrier, but the upgraded meal has become very popular. So there is definitely a market for both kind of or better quality or kind of a bit more exciting option out there, and people are willing to pay for it. So there definitely is a demand there. So we just have to kind of figure out how to meet that in in a efficient way.
And airlines with the pre-order that they're implementing, they always start also with the premium classes. And of course, overall for the airline waste, if you're looking at boarding, when you don't have that spread out through the economy classes as well, there's struggles there. There's barriers there. First of all, just the service flow. It's very difficult to try to do such a large grouping in economy of an uptick of pre-order. So you do have other hurdles there that airlines would face, sort of applying that universally across both premium cabins and the economy cabins as well.
In my opinion, there are more than just few hurdles in pre-ordering meals. For airlines, it's a huge barrier because they have to work with caterers in different locations, and that caterers has to use specified platform or software, and also you have to add integration with DCS systems, yeah, like whatever it is, and then it all has to be also shown to the passengers in the right exact moment so that they can know what to buy, what's available for pre-order. So there are like few barriers that have to be overcome by the airlines for them to present pre-orders. And that is why I think also not many airlines are still providing pre-order options for passengers because there are many, many steps and many small bricks that has to be put into that project. And therefore, yeah, that's my idea.
I think when we talk about retail programs, we need to distinguish about short haul flights and long haul flights. Okay, we hear now talking about the catering and food and beverage. We all know that we have lots of other opportunities to retail on board. And I think if we talk about retail programs, even, I have one airline here in Latin America that actually has decided to implement retail, but not necessarily for food and beverage. So focus on the other points. And while retail programs for food and beverage on short haul flights are, I would say, relatively common and well known, there's still not much applied in long haul flights, right? Because I think I think people are getting bored of the pasta and chicken selection. And I think it would be a large enrichment and a differentiation for the airline to have this ability to interact with their passengers and to ask them what they want.
I think one of the key things as well with pre-order is I think Kia mentioned it's expanding the options available, because if you're just pre-ordering what's going to be available on the aircraft, how enticing is that? It's also then coupling those pre-orders either of expanded or existing range to intelligently load. Because if you look at it from the airline's point of view, we've already touched on the space on board is limited. So if I can use that data, and once you get above about 15 to 20% in terms of pre-order adoption, you can significantly change what you're loading on board based on demand. Because if you just pack the same, regardless of what's been pre-ordered, you may not actually have what somebody's pre-ordered to deliver when it comes to the fourth or fifth leg of the day. So coupling those pre-orders intelligently with what's loaded on the aircraft and forecast is going to let you maximize that space a lot more and drive towards those waste and sustainability goals that we know all the airlines have.
Paul, one of the questions on the list actually here is what is the ideal target percentage for pre-order sales and how does this affect loading logistics? Do you feel that there is sort of like an ideal target percentage? I think that would probably differ from short haul and long haul as well, right?
Yeah, I think, about double-digit percentages, you start to see operational benefits. Once you get north of 20%, then you can start to see significant differences in the impact on the onboard retail program. And then you can start combining that with some intelligent forecasting for what you're loading on board and really move the needle on the waste, on the fuel burn, on the passenger satisfaction, because there'll be some areas where you actually need to put more on because the demand is higher. So yeah, above 10%, you start to see an operational impact. Once you get north of 20%, you start to really move the needle in terms of how that program starts to stack up.
Okay.
When we did the when we did the retail program for Singapore Airlines, we basically converted a program that was about 10% pre-order and 90% buy on board to a program that ended up being 90% pre-order and 10% buy on board. And so in the end, that created massive savings because they have three trolleys on board. This is duty free, not F&B. Three trolleys on board, out of which only half of one is now for spontaneous sales. Everything else is actually pre-ordered. And as those of you know that have seen duty-free operations, you very often fly a product up to 40 legs before you sell it. So the fuel savings alone of doing that again goes into the millions.
In
Yeah.
my opinion, for food and beverage retail on board, the number of around 30% is realistic and achievable. And at this stage of around 30%, it doesn't affect the cabin service too much. Crew still has time to serve passengers who want to buy something on board, and of course deliver pre-orders to the ones who did it before. So realistically, I think that 30% is a good number for pre-orders of meals and beverages on board.
Okay. Okay. Um, I feel like we've covered a lot already in terms of, how interconnected everything is. I'm interested to hear at this point, like kind of today, how accurately can AI and systems predict demand and reduce food waste, would you say? What are maybe some of the more specific data points beyond just the historical sales that are Kai, I see you kind of nodding your head here. That are the most predictive. Like what do we need and where are we at today?
Well,
I think that the historical sales always gives you some degree of a benchmark, but that alone isn't going to necessarily tell you anything because the same flight on this day last year may have a different number of passengers, different day of the week. It depends whether or not it's a holiday period. And then you look at other external factors, things like events, concerts, things like that. You look at the aircraft layout. Um, you combine all that together, and then you can look at a very significant, in the 90% accuracy of what you would load versus what is actually sold. Now, the critical piece, well, there's two critical pieces for the airlines. One is to load each flight dynamically, and we look at it across the span of a day. So if an aircraft does 6 legs in total and has an uplift after 3 or 4, we'll look at that across the whole day. How do you then operationally handle that? Because packing each aircraft individually changes your operations. And how do you make sure passengers still get their first choice as well? So what you want to do is stock as close as possible to the forecast, but it then becomes a business decision of do I want to make sure passengers get their first choice and how much do I want to buffer certain things? But I think we're seeing in the 90% and above, in some cases as high as 96% accuracy as to what sells, based on the external factors coming in outside of historical sales and combining that together to give the airlines a forecast. And we're starting to see more and more adoption of that. And that, again, significantly helps both reduce the onboard waste, which is a huge element for some airlines today, and also bring down that fuel burn that Kian talked about. Because if you don't pack things and have them flying around and coming back, again, you're saving fuel on that.
We're not really talking about AI here yet. We're talking about machine learning to a large extent, because
Yes.
we're primarily learning from a set of experienced data.
Right.
But nevertheless, I think the real issue we have is that data set. Because when you're looking at an airline that for 5 years has been selling the same stuff on board, and then you're trying to learn from that data, the learning is relatively limited, right? So the possibility to learn really increases exponentially once you start experimenting with the retail program and then learn from those experiments. Yeah, because if you've always sold 70% of the chicken sandwiches, you know that there's not much AI you can apply to that. You need to know how many I don't know, tofu sandwiches you would have sold. So I think that a key thing about all of this is that predictions only are really valuable when you start collecting new data and also weave in demographic data, location data, time of day data, etc., etc. And that tends to, like Paul said, becomes tricky for an airline to really load every single trolley differently based on what the predictive algorithm thinks would be the best setup. And it's often actually the caterers that are then the limiting factors who say we just can't do that. Yeah.
We also
Well,
found that actually in the end it's going to be humans who are going to decide how many and of what has to go on board. And even actually crew performance affects on how goods are sold on board. And high performing cabin crew who sell real good and flying on particular flights, they actually tend to attract more of food to be loaded on a flight based on the machine learning outcomes. Because when we combine everything, all the data sets from different points, we see that human actually input more data and more decisions into how much to load everything. So it's all about people by the end.
Some of you mentioned, I think it's key to overcome the operational barrier, and this is typically done by system integration. Because the most important thing, and that's always the key on pre-sale, you create an expectation. And so if you don't, for any reason, you don't deliver the product that the person bought on board, or bought previously, and you don't deliver it on board, he's going to be really furious. And something similar happens when people rely on a buy on board program, so they can buy some food on board, and then they find out, oh, there's no more food left on this flight leg. So I think get the data, process the data, but also then integrate, and that also what you mentioned, Rodney, integrate all the players that are in the supply chain to fulfill this promise.
While we touch on the operational challenges, we kind of make it sound like it's incredibly difficult. There's already catering companies that are putting new models in place to be able to do this. So having individual drawers move around and be scannable, and just knowing what needs to go in that drawer based on predictions. So people are moving forward because the demand from the airlines is there to start moving towards this. Otherwise, if you just keep looking and saying operationally it's not possible, then it will never get done. The adoption is actually starting to take place already.
Okay. Okay. Beyond like crew point of sale, I know that we had spoken a little bit before about, are passengers aware that pre-order is available? Other than maybe like point of sale with crew, seat back screen ordering or app integration, are there kind of any avenues that are proving most effective at this time?
I think crew is always on every flight is a bottleneck. So if we can diversify this point of sale, this is always good. So several things you mentioned on your own device or on the screen, to have this data integration, definitely is
Yeah,
good.
I think it's something that we are very interested in. Of course, when you have point of sales on board, it doesn't give that much flexibility, and it's not, the passengers are not used to buying in that sense that you have to look at the menu and then you have to make the choice when the trolley actually passes you. So it's like a very short window of opportunity to actually sell. But whilst, for example, the new generation, they want to sit, look at their phone, browse through the menu, perhaps add to cart and remove again, and get it kind of when they are ready to receive it. So we are very much kind of interested in kind of looking into kind of what kind of digital solutions can have on board, perhaps then in additional to the physical menu. But we have started to kind of look into that. And as I said, there's a lot of operational and technical challenges, but the solutions are there. It's kind of, we just need to kind of figure out what would work for us. But we definitely see that we need to kind of meet the customer expectation of a more kind of interactive digital buying solution. We have been, when you're brainstorming in the office, we talk about, how close to your flight can you actually kind of order something or buy something, or should it be like one specific offer for that flight because you got a really good offer from from that base, or can it be something by the gate so you can actually order then and there and then get it whilst you're on board. So it's a tons of ideas, but it's just trying to figure out kind of what can we do, and getting all stakeholders involved in it. But it's a super exciting area, especially for us as an airline.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
We're in a very fortunate situation in the sense that we have a few airlines where we control, so to speak, the entire end-to-end journey. So we know every single touch point, which one converts best. And that's something that very few airlines actually have any data on, because they have 4 different vendors doing the different touch points. And they sometimes don't get the data, very often, in fact. And what we can say is that it's not the same for every airline. But I mean, there are some universal truths, for example, that shopping directly in the IFE has a very low uptick rate. Generally, bring your own device is a much higher uptick. But that also has to do with the lack of speed on an IFE, depending on the touch screen, how modern it is, etc., etc. But what we have found is that every touch point you add exponential conversion along the other touch points. And so I think that is the critical thing to think about here. Once you realize as an airline that you have way more touch points outside of the cabin than inside the cabin, then you can actually extend that journey very significantly. So for example, for pre-order, we are seeing the highest conversion points by far for both duty-free and F&B in check-in email reminders that are sent 12 hours before the flight. Now, if as an airline operationally you can no longer fulfill a pre-order because you're already 12 hours close to the flight, then you have a big problem, because that's where we're converting 60% of all of the sales. Yeah, so in the end, adding a lot of touch points is really critical, and not thinking about the cabin separately from the booking, from the pre-order, from the check-in, and from the also after flight engagement when it comes to, the next flight, the return flight, etc. And when you offer the ability, for example, to also already order for your return flight while you're on board, that again opens new conversion points.
Veronica, this has come up a couple times now. How close to departure can the airline move the pre-order window while like maintaining this, specifically for F&B, this catering like logistics feasibility, would you say? And is there something that needs to change there?
Yeah, well, I don't know the solution or the answer, but as you know, today we have 36 hours before when it comes to the pre-order meals, at least, and we see that perhaps the customer are not making the decision whether they should pack their own lunch or buy at the airport or buy something on board until they're actually sitting in the car or at the bus shuttle on the way. So we are really interesting to kind of look into how we can move that time gap even closer to the actual departure. As we talked about, people don't plan that much ahead anymore. It's much more spontaneous, and when they want something, they want it straight away. So, but as I say, there's a lot of stakeholders that need to be involved to ensure that that you actually get the right products or right items on board at that time. But of course, if you're not able to meet that, then you're then you're stuck with dissatisfied passengers, and that is something that we are definitely not looking for. So, customer satisfaction needs to be there at all time. That's kind of part of the whole success rate.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything to sort of add on that? Ronnie, I know you had spoken a little bit before about all of the different players that are involved.
Well, that's true. And when you come down to it, a lot of times airlines are limited based on it even gets back to limitations that they have because they have contractual agreements with their caterers. that have built into those contracts these cutoff times, et cetera. The pre-order uptake, shortening that window means that it's less creativity in the design of that meal. So the more complexity for a caterer to say, oh, this is a specialized, and we piped on a special message onto this cookie for them, or you're having a very customized kind of meal choice, broadens that window and lengthens, increases that cutoff window longer than expected. So pre-order on things that are more designs that are pre-approved and pre-packaged and ready to go. I think those are easier things to turn around for caterers and suppliers.
That caterers play a crucial role here in preparing the pre-orders and time gap before the flight actually takes off. And we've seen cases when it's actually only about 6 hours for some caterers to be able to prepare the foods and deliver them for the flight, which is incoming from base airport somewhere. And usually it's 12 hours for our customers to be able to provide the cutoff for the pre-orders. So it's 6 and 12 hours.
I see a large opportunity for pre-order on the long haul flights. Maybe not necessarily to make money, but in order for the personalization, and at the end of the day to reduce the waste and increase the experience on board. So I think everybody knows. No, when people go on a long haul flight, they all comment about the food. It's always something that people talk about. Nevertheless, if you buy a ticket, nobody asks you about the food. So I think there's a large opportunity there to simply ask the people, okay, what do you want to eat? And for sure, not an open menu. It must be a restricted menu. But then you have, in theory, the opportunity at the time of purchase already to launch this question.
I think as well, bringing it back to how you can do things differently on the short haul as well, because long haul, I think everyone agrees, right? The use case for pre-order is going to be stronger on the short haul. To give some actual quantifiable examples, right? On Iberia Express, when you let people order from their own devices to seat, you see a big difference in terms of sales. There's a 41% increase in sales, 29% more spend per head if I can self-serve. So that goes back to that. People are used to that kind of Uber Eats, spontaneity. I'm not waiting for the trolley to come through the cabin. So enabling that kind of technology on board, it's quantifiable, right? Nearly a 30% increase in spend per head, I think makes most airlines pretty happy.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up, there's kind of two things that I want to touch on. One is to cycle back to personalization, because that was sort of something that came up as a theme right out of the gates. I think it would be, wild to not talk about it. So I want to hear from everybody. What does the future of personalization look like in flight when it comes to food and beverage retail? What role does maybe machine learning have at this time in terms of ability to personalize? And what platforms do you think are going to be available to a passenger to have a more personalized experience? Who wants to start with this one?
Well, I think beyond the data you're able to collect and inquiries of passengers, everything, there's the big source of information which a lot of airlines don't use enough is their own crew. Because they're on a daily basis in contact with a passenger. They collect a lot of comments and things what maybe is missing or what people would like to see. So this would be a good source.
And the mechanism to simply collect that from crew, because crew doesn't want to sit at the end of the flight filling out a thing. So even if it's in a very targeted, almost in a marketing type survey for the crew, just to be like, what was the top abnormal request on this flight today? What was, very targeted to start to get at least get data feedback and a quantity of data feedback from the crew.
Veronica, did you have something you want?
Yeah, no, I just kind of want to elevate the crew on board. They're so important for us. We can have the best assortment and the best profitability. But if the crew doesn't want to sell anything, then nothing gets sold on board. To say it like that, but we are really, focusing on building a sales culture. We're doing a lot of training, and we are tracking the performance in their EPOS devices. We're doing crew incentives and competitions, because we are really seeing that, if you train the crew like a salesperson, they are more or less our sales force out there. That really has a very big impact on the sales on board, and they kind of, it's not like they're selling something that's personalized, but they make the kind of the shopping experience more personalized for the passengers on board, and they make the passengers seen and heard. So we are very much focusing on building that kind of sales culture and sales mentality, and not just walking through with the trolley. So they are huge in kind of making the success on board.
I would say a key thing to personalization. I mean, you can do the personal touch, right? That's something that the crew can do without knowing anything about the passenger. But if you're talking about personalization, then you do need data, and you need that data accessible, and it can't be in silos. So the key thing is, if you want to do a personalized service on board, the crew needs to have access to data on each passenger, and that data needs to be always there, needs to be consolidated, needs to be live, etc. So where this ties in nicely is that so for example, with Iceland Air, we've just recently enabled the possibility to buy with loyalty points even though you're offline. So that's of course a tricky thing. But what it leads to is that you can now start connecting every single food purchase where you're using loyalty points to that actually loyalty member. And so you can start building profiles on your customers, and you start seeing what they like to eat on board or not. And when you then couple that in with the crew feedback directly on the EPOS device, and not in some kind of offline manual that they have to later on fill out, you start collecting data in the right places. And of course, a lot of data can be collected, especially in the pre-order journey, where customers are also much more likely to voice their opinion, and it can be recorded than when you're on board. So in the end, as long as you can find a single source of truth for data, then you can really start personalizing that journey also.
Almas?
Yeah, actually, we agree with Kian, because we've seen also that information from passengers, from crew members, and combining that in one system, especially using the loyalty programs, gives huge result, because passengers, they actually love to indicate what they love to eat and drink, and then collecting this all data in the EPOS system helps us to create the profile of the passenger. And also, this ability for passengers to dynamically change right on board in flight what they want to buy with their main product, for example, if it's sandwich, and then they can select whatever drink, and that will be included into the combo. It helps actually to see and predict what personalization is for the passenger. I mean, what does it mean for them? It's not about making their branded things or special items, but it's like what we have on board and what you can combine it with other stuff on board. That's how we do it.
Awesome. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is the ability to go a little further, right? So it's taking every interaction the passenger has with the airline at different touch points. So, some have been mentioned already in terms of the booking, the loyalty, what they're spending on tickets, the pre-order, the onboard retail, combining that with the connectivity and their interactions, whether that's with the IFE or using their own devices, you can start to behave like on the ground retailers do, or some of the platforms, like Netflix, where you're, rather than putting people into buckets, you're using all of the individual interactions and touch points to have a very refined profile of what that person is and isn't interested in, and then starting to serve up offers that are going to be interesting to them based on both those previous interactions and what you perceive for the future for them. So connectivity is going to unlock a lot of that, but the key part to it is taking all of those different data points, which can be siloed in some cases, bringing those together and then driving meaningful outputs. And the ability to do it technically is there. And I think you'll see over the next year or two, more and more airlines starting to make moves in that direction.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I want to open the floor to kind of see if anyone has anything else to add. Kai is our co-moderator. Anyone have kind of, anything that we haven't touched on that you think we should have at this point?
Well, maybe I love this topic of personalization. I just want to have a very quick story, which we implemented like 15 years ago in a retail program we implemented here in Brazil. And it was something very simple, where we asked the passengers, look, we have these 3 different kind of sandwiches. Which one would you like to prefer? Would you prefer to see on board? And then they voted, and then afterwards we published and said, oh, 60% of the people voted for this sandwich, so this is the sandwich we're implementing. And for sure, definitely, this was the item that was most sold. Not necessarily because they're the same passenger, because for the passengers it was important. I'm asked my opinion, and they react up on my vote. So this is a very powerful tool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists again, our co-moderator for joining us today, and to WTCE for having us. I think it's been a great discussion, and I'm excited to hear it continue to evolve as the years go by. So thank you again to everybody.